Welcome back, everyone, to the Madness and Grace podcast. Today, I'm so excited because we are joined by Kay Warren. Thank you so much for being here, Kay. How are you doing?
I am doing great. It's a nice, warm, finally day, after felt like a really long winter. So it's good.
Totally.
Good.
And Matt's here as well, of course. How are you, Matt?
I'm doing well, Emily. How are you today?
Great. Well, I'm really excited to have this discussion and do this interview with you, Kay. Matt, why don't you introduce our guest?
Absolutely. Kay Warren is the co-founder of Saddleback Church with her husband, Rick. That's in Lake Forest, California. And that occurred in 1980. And they served there until Rick's retirement in September of 2022. After the death of her son, Matthew, who lived with serious mental illness for most of his life, she founded Saddleback's Hope for Mental Health initiative as a way to support individuals and family members of loved ones with mental illness and suicidal ideations. The initiative also trains others in the faith community how to launch or expand existing mental health ministries. In 2019, Kay started Breathe, a ministry to support parents of children with serious mental illness. Breathe events include weekend respite retreats, online retreats, and free Zoom calls with mental health professionals. She is an author and has authored several books, including Choose Joy Because Happiness Isn't Enough. She's also a mom, a grandma, and probably most importantly to me, she is my friend. And we have been friends for many years as we advocate for those with mental health problems. And I'm so very happy that you are with us today, Kay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It means a lot.
If y'all don't mind, I'll go ahead and kick us off with our first question. Like many of our listeners, and of course, Matt and myself as well, the topic of mental illness is very personal for you, Kay. For those who don't already know your story, could you tell us a little bit about your family's experience with mental illness?
Sure. Matt mentioned it there in the sort of the bio introduction part. Our youngest child, Matthew, started showing signs of, at first I just called it being different. Because he was the youngest, I knew he wasn't like his older brother and sister in his mood, and he would get angry when he was a baby. He would hold his breath till he passed out. And if he got upset, he'd hold his breath till he passed out. He just had a hard time switching moods. If he lost at Candyland, he'd throw the game and, throw the board, and you couldn't console him. And, he was just different, but it never occurred to me that the differences that I was seeing had anything to do with mental illness, because I had no idea that children could experience mental illness. I genuinely didn't know that. And so when he was 7, it was when I remember asking the children's pastor at Saddleback, can children have a mental illness? And he was told yes. And so then we started, taking him to doctors, and the diagnoses just began to stack up. He was diagnosed with clinical depression when he was 7. And then shortly after that, panic disorder. And then by the time he was 11, early onset bipolar. And then at 12, suicidal ideation. And then, OCD, body dysmorphic disorder. And then the last diagnosis that he got, did I leave out major depression? How could I leave out major depression in his teenage years? And then his last diagnosis about 2 years before he died was borderline personality disorder. And what that really tells me is that mental illness is difficult to diagnose sometimes. Yeah. It is just a difficult thing to try to wrangle. And so he lived most of his 27 years tortured. There's just no way to put it. He just had a tortured existence. And, we did everything we knew to do, took him to all the doctors. We were fortunate to have good insurance and had, were secure financially and could seek help and doctors and treatment. And it just, none of it was enough, none of it was enough. And at 27, April 5th, 2013, we just observed the 10th anniversary a few weeks ago. He took his life. He hit that intractable wall of mental illness one too many times, and he took his life. So he had a tortured existence. His illness was serious enough that it affected our whole family. our two other children, their spouses, nieces, nephews, grandparents, all of us ate with him and for him. And it was rough. It was rough.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, Kay, you've shared with me in the past. In fact, actually, one of the very first times we ever met, which I don't think was very long after Matthew had
It was
passed
just
away.
about 6 weeks, Matt.
You shared with me many of the reactions that you and Rick had received from believers, both positive and negative. I have to say, unfortunately, more of the negative ones stuck in my mind, towards you guys. And, many in our audience, they may know someone who's had a similar loss. And so I don't like to focus on the negative. So what advice would you give them on how they might compassionately come alongside someone who's lost a loved one to suicide?
Yeah. I think that the biggest word I could say is just be there. Your presence is the most powerful way to comfort somebody. None of us know what to say. There aren't any good words. There just are no good words. Somebody loses a child, there's no good words. You add suicide to it, it just adds layers. And so words are not nearly as important as your presence, being there, weeping with somebody, letting their tears flow, not trying to stop. We're so uncomfortable with grief, and especially grief that's around, like suicide, something that's traumatic. And we want to make ourselves feel better really quickly. So sometimes we try to minimize or shush, the grieving person. And I just can't say enough. Be there, listen, lean in, give a hug. The most powerful thing you can probably say is, I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm so sorry for your loss. I wish this were not true. And be careful with trotting out all the scriptures that that frequently are meant to offer comfort. But sometimes in the face of fresh loss, it can feel hollow, and it can feel like a way of trying to push aside the depth of agony and suffering that someone is experiencing. So keep Job and his friends in mind, because Job's friends, they did great the first 7 days. They came and they sat with him. They got on the ground with him. Bible says that they couldn't speak a word because his suffering was so great. Mm-hmm. And it was just when they began to try to, figure it out or make sense of it or comfort or whatever, that's when they blew it. That's when it all turned cold for Job. So keep those people in mind and listen. Do those concrete acts of service that bring a meal, give a gift card, for DoorDash or something, or Uber Eats or something. Pick up family who are coming in from the airport, maybe for the funeral service. It's just all those practical things when people cannot think what to do. They're in shock. And when the people around them just quietly serve, quietly are there, quietly bring a meal. And be careful. I'd say this last thing on this. Be careful about telling somebody how they feel. Oh, I know just how you feel. Because the truth is you do not. Even if you lost, I'm really careful when I talk to other people who've lost a child to suicide. I never, ever say to them, oh, I know exactly how you feel, because I don't. The reality is I may have lost a child and they may have lost a child, which is same category, child loss. But from there, it's not at all the same, because I lost Matthew. I lost a specific person, and those parents lost a specific child. So the most we can do, hold each other, weep with each other, be there, listen, just say, I'm not going anywhere. Your pain is mine. Those are the kinds of things that I think make a difference to grieving families.
Right. No, I really like what you said there about really just do something. I mean, even small little things make a huge difference. You don't have to try to fix the whole issue. You can't fix the whole issue. So why try? And be comfortable with suffering.
Yes.
I mean, we are so uncomfortable with that. I think we've almost convinced ourselves that we're not supposed to ever experience it somehow, even though that's what we're promised. And so, we're uncomfortable with our own, but we're uncomfortable with others people. So,
well, especially suffering that doesn't make sense.
Absolutely.
I mean, some suffering you can sort of make some sense around it. Suicide, it just doesn't. It just doesn't make sense. So we really don't know what to do.
When there's a clear bad guy and
Yes.
someone's suffering,
Yes.
then we all can rally
We
together.
do slightly better in those circumstances, but we're still not very good at it. Yeah.
We are also quick to say, I understand what you're feeling. And that doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter if I do understand it. It doesn't.
That's right.
I don't know that really would even help me if someone really knew what I was. So I
think we're better off saying something like, I hear you, or that must be terrible, or that sounds awful, or that must have been heartbreaking. You can help people know that you're hearing their feelings without trying to act like you know how they're feeling.
Absolutely. So how has Matthew's passing affected your faith, and what has God done in the dark times to draw you close to him?
Well, that's a seminar's worth of material.
I know. That's why I put it in the middle. So,
at first, honestly, I felt, besides the shock and the horror and the trauma and all those things, as it related to God, I think I felt wounded. I felt like a really good friend had turned his back on me. And it wasn't like, well, you don't exist, God. It's not even like you're terrible. It's just like, where did you go? Not that I thought we had this deal, like you would not ever allow that. Not that. It's more just like, I trusted you with my son. I trusted you. I thought you were going to heal him, and you didn't. And where were you? And it just felt just this deep wounding of being betrayed by a friend. And then it kind of moved into a little bit of, I think, numbness of, well, whatever, you're going to do what you want to do. You're God. You're going to do what you want to do. A little bit of bitterness, a little cynicism, a little numbness. And then after a few months of both of those things, it was like, I have to reconnect to God. I have to. I cannot live with He is my air. He is the breath in my lungs. I have to reconnect to him. And so then that process of reconnecting with God was actually a sweet one, because I decided that I wasn't going to ignore my questions. I had so many unanswered questions about Matthew's death, about God, about faith, all those things. And I just decided I wasn't going to ignore those. I wasn't going to let anybody try to pacify me or placate me or tell me that I couldn't ask those questions, that I couldn't be mad at God, that I couldn't feel estranged. I started writing those out on little slips of paper, all those questions. And I put them in what I call my mystery pot. I literally have a little pot. And I put those questions in there, and I don't ignore them. I know one of these days, Jesus and I are going to sit down face to face, and all those things that have bothered me through the years, the stuff I can't answer about why didn't you stop him? Those kinds of things. I know that we'll talk about him. And I know in the presence of Jesus, as he weeps with me, that it will be a dear time. Right. And I know some things will make sense then that don't make sense now. And I'm holding on for that. Right. I also had to rebuild my hope. And so I had a box that actually says hope on it. I'm very literal. And so I had a box that said hope, and it used to be filled with verses that were hope for Matthew's healing here. I took those verses out, and it's not because those verses weren't true, but they just weren't true for him. God didn't heal him on the earth. But instead, I put the very first verse I put in my hope box was 1 Corinthians 15:43, which says, these bodies are buried in brokenness, but they will be raised in glory. They are buried in weakness, but they will be raised in strength. Well, that was something I can hold on to. I believe that. That's not dependent on what happens here on this earth. It has nothing to do with external circumstances. I believe that truth. Matthew's body was buried in brokenness and weakness, but it will be raised in glory and in strength. And as I have stood at his grave for 10 years, I say that every time your body, Matthew, was buried in brokenness, you will be raised. Glory. Your body was buried in weakness, but you will be raised in strength. It's true for him. It's true for me. It's true for anybody who has met the resurrected Jesus. And so that began to rebuild my hope. not about an outcome here. Because listen, we don't know the outcomes here. We just don't. Our hope cannot be in our children. Our hope cannot be in an outcome for our children. We can have hope for our children or our loved ones or ourselves, but our hope has to be in Jesus because he cannot be taken away. And so I really feel like the circumstances of my life tried to yank the tree of my faith. You know, the Bible often talks about that we're like trees planted by the river, Jeremiah 17, Psalm 1. We're like trees planted by the river. And I feel like the circumstances of our lives are constantly trying to like rip the root, rip us out by the roots. But because I had spent more than 50 years sending my roots deep into the character and the goodness of God, when those circumstances threatened my faith, the roots held. And so I would tell anybody who's listening, it is never too late to start sending your roots deep into the goodness and the character of God, because the circumstances and our spiritual enemy will do everything possible to try to rip out the tree of our faith. And your roots can hold if you have made a practice of sending them into the goodness of God.
Wow, that's very powerful. I really appreciate you.
And great advice for everyone, not even if they're not going through something like this. It applies to everything. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we, in the good times is when we are getting those roots in deeper. We don't wait. Job didn't wait. He was prepared.
Exactly.
And he held on.
Exactly.
And so now, you and I have spoken far too many places probably over the years in the same presentation about the church being involved in mental health care and caring for those who are struggling with these illnesses. What are some positive changes that you've seen, say, over the last couple of decades in this area of the church and mental health?
I think the biggest thing for me is that more and more people are believing that it's real. That it's not just a spiritual issue, that it's not a try harder issue, memorize more verses issue, confess your sins. It is not just a spiritual issue, and that there really is something going on in our bodies and our brains. And that to me is so positive. That's been a huge change. Still, there are pockets of people that still feel it's only a spiritual issue, that it's only this, or it's only demonic or whatever. But those folks seem to be fewer and fewer. So I'm really grateful for that. And I think it's because of efforts of some of the stuff that we've done, Matt, some of the conferences where we've been at, and we've talked to pastors and church leaders and folks, helping them understand, the reality of mental illness. But I think the downside of that, the only downside I would see to that is that then people can then say, oh, well, it's a medical issue. And the church, we don't do medical issues. We don't know what to do with a medical issue. We'll let the medical professionals take care of that. I don't know what to do. If it's medical, great. Let the medical professionals take care of it. The problem with that is that, as Dr. John Swinton, one of my mentors, says, as long as you look at this through the lens of, okay, there's a person with a mental illness, then you don't have to care, or you don't have to care as much. You don't have to do anything. But if you switch it and you say, oh, there's a person with a mental illness, then suddenly it's the church's job to care about persons, because theoretically nobody cares for persons like the church. That's our DNA. That's our charge from God, is to care for each other and care for vulnerable people. So I love the emphasis on it's not just a spiritual issue, it's real. I think we just have to be careful then that we still take responsibility for the part that the church can play, which is to love, care for, support, be there, protect, nourish people with mental illness. The church can't say, sorry, you burned too many bridges. The church is the place where people living with mental illness, it's the last resource for people living with mental illness, because fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters, the bridges may get burned, with sometimes the devastation of mental illness. Family ties can lessen, but the church can't ever do that. The church has to be the one last safe resort that says, we will never leave you, whether you've relapsed, whether you're healthy, whether you are in bad shape, whether you are going to make it or not make it, we're going to be here. And I love to see the churches that are stepping up in those ways.
Great. Thank you very much.
That's a great segue into the last question. You mentioned mothers, fathers, family, how those ties could be broken. But for all the mothers and fathers listening who may have a child diagnosed with a mental illness, what encouragement can you offer them as they struggle daily to care for their own child?
Yeah, it's a long journey. The journey through mental illness, it's a long, long journey. And parents and family members need respite, need some places to stop and breathe, catch your breath. And which is why the ministry that I have called Breathe is exactly intended to be a respite time or a breathing spot on a long journey. Frederick Buechner has a quote that he said after his daughter, who nearly died of an eating disorder. He said, what good is a bleeding heart if you bleed to death? Yeah. What good is a bleeding heart if you bleed out? So as parents, we have to make sure that we are on this long journey taking care of ourselves. Which is very difficult to do, because if you have a loved one with a really intense needs, it's difficult to find time and ways to take care of yourself. And I don't mean things like sometimes you read in magazines, take a bubble bath or have a cup of tea or, as though that's going to make it all better. It's deeper
that
than
didn't do it for you? Bubble bath?
Well, for about 3 minutes. That's about it. So it's deeper than that. It's making sure that you are really reconnected with God. I absolutely believe in learning how to breathe. I mean, we all breathe, might as well learn how to do it well. God does something in our bodies when they are well oxygenated. Our brains work better. Our bodies, our central nervous system works better. We're better equipped to make good decisions for our family. So I'm serious. Learn how to breathe. Look at breath work. I think that breath connects us with God. It points us back to the very beginnings of our creation, that he breathed his breath into us. And so to use prayer, our breath as prayer, I mean, there's so much I could say, but I just think for myself, learning how to breathe has been a really important thing, and keeping connected with God. I look for beauty every single day. I'm a birder. I'm a total birder nerd now, Matt. You didn't know me as a birder, but I'm a birder now, and I'm crazy about it. And I have to be outside every day, and I'm in nature. But God gave us these 5 senses, not just to protect us, but to actually sweeten what can be sometimes a bitter experience. Life is hard. And these senses of ours, to take in beauty, to take in music, to take in nature. Yeah. So parents, those are the kinds of practices that I think actually strengthen us and allow us to keep going and keep hope alive over a very long journey.
I like that you're giving parents permission to have moments where they don't just think about their ill child.
Yes.
And so just because your child has an illness, a mental illness, doesn't mean you don't have a life.
Yes.
And so I appreciate that.
That's great advice. And Kay, thank you so much for sharing your story. I know I'm personally very touched by it, so I know our listeners are going to be as well. For everyone who's listening, I, of course, will leave all of HHCI's information in the show notes, as well as Kay's ministry, Breathe, so that everybody can check that out. Thank you so much again, Kay and Matt.
Thanks for being here, Kay.
Good to be with you always. Thank you.